We got all kind of music now that ain't got nothing to do with nothing except cars and money and glory. But she was about getting Angela Davis out of jail. She was about working with Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson and Al.
We watched Aretha bear her cross down here. She had to sing with a broken heart. She had to work when she didn't get paid.
But it turns out Aretha Franklin's ability to empower black people through her music got her some unwanted attention from the FBI.
The FBI closely watched Aretha Franklin throughout her life until her passing. They kept an eye on her because they were interested in her connections to groups like the Black Panthers and suspected ties to organized crime. Aretha Franklin was not just the Queen of Soul. She was connected to powerful and sometimes controversial people. People said she had friends in the wrong places, but others thought she was being unfairly targeted. Now the question is, did this surveillance affect her life and career? Let's take a closer look at why the FBI was so interested in Aretha Franklin. Aretha Louise Franklin was born on March 25, 1942, to Barbara and Clarence LaVaughn, C.L. Franklin. She was delivered at her family's home located at 406 Lucy Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee. Her father was a Baptist minister and circuit preacher originally from Shelby, Mississippi, while her mother was an accomplished piano player and vocalist. Both Mr. and Mrs. Franklin had children from prior relationships, in addition to the 4 children they had together. When Aretha was 2, the family relocated to Buffalo, New York. By the time Aretha turned 5, C.L. Franklin had permanently relocated the family to Detroit, Michigan, where he took over the pastorship of the New Bethel Baptist Church. The Franklins had a troubled marriage due to Mr. Franklin's infidelities, and they separated in 1948. At that time, Barbara Franklin returned to Buffalo with Aretha's half-brother, Vaughn. After the separation, Aretha recalled seeing her mother in Buffalo during the summer, and Barbara Franklin frequently visited her children in Detroit. Aretha's mother died of a heart attack on March 7, 1952, before Aretha's 10th birthday. Several women, including Aretha's grandmother Rachel and Mahalia Jackson, took turns helping with the children at the Franklin home. During this time, Aretha learned how to play piano by ear. She also attended public school in Detroit, going through her first year at Northern High School, but dropping out during her second year.
You were very close with your dad.
Yes.
Terrible thing happened, right? There was a burglary and he was shot?
Yes. He was comatose for 6 years.
Aretha's father's emotionally driven sermons resulted in his being known as the man with the $1 million voice. He earned thousands of dollars for sermons in various churches across the country. His fame led to his home being visited by various celebrities. Among the visitors were gospel musicians Clara Ward, James Cleveland, and early Caravans members Albertina Walker and Inez Andrews. Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Wilson, and Sam Cooke all became friends of C.L. Franklin as well. Ward was romantically involved with Aretha's father from around 1949 until Ward's death in 1973, though Aretha preferred to view them strictly as friends. Ward also served as a role model to the young Aretha. Just after her mother's death, Franklin began singing solos at New Bethel Baptist Church, debuting with the hymn, "Jesus, Be a Fence Around Me." When Franklin was 12, her father began managing her. He would take her on the road with him during his gospel caravan tours for her to perform in various churches. He also helped her sign her first recording deal with JVB Records. Recording equipment was installed inside New Bethel Baptist Church, and 9 tracks were recorded. When Franklin was featured on vocals and piano. In 1956, JVB released Franklin's first single, Never Grow Old, backed with You Grow Closer. Precious Lord, backed with Precious Lord, followed in 1959. These 4 tracks, with the addition of There Is a Fountain Filled with Blood, were released on side 1 of the 1956 album Spirituals. This was reissued by Battle Records in 1962 under the same title. In 1965, Checker Records released Songs of Faith, featuring the 5 tracks from the 1956 Spirituals album, with the addition of 4 previously unreleased recordings. Aretha was only 14 when Songs of Faith was recorded. During this time, Franklin would occasionally travel with the Soul Stirrers. As a young gospel singer, Franklin spent summers on the gospel circuit in Chicago and stayed with Mavis Staples' family. According to music producer Quincy Jones, while Franklin was still young, Dinah Washington let him know that Aretha was the next one. In the 1980s, Franklin continued to evolve, signing with Arista Records and collaborating with legendary producer Clive Davis. She achieved commercial success with albums like Who's Zoomin' Who and Aretha, which featured hits such as Freeway of Love and I Knew You Were Waiting for Me. Aretha was watched closely by the FBI for a staggering 40 years, from 1967 to 2007. Imagine that, 4 decades under their surveillance. It wasn't until 2018, just after she passed away, that people even found out about this massive FBI file on her.
But it turns out Aretha Franklin's ability to empower black people through her music got her some unwanted attention from the FBI.
So why was Aretha Franklin being watched so closely? The file from the FBI is filled with words that set off alarms for the government. Words like communism, black nationalism, and radical politics. They even suspected her of having feelings of hatred toward America. But why would they think that about the Queen of Soul? Back in her younger days, Aretha Franklin was involved with the civil rights movement. She knew Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and even sang at his funeral. Dr. King was a hero to many now, but back then, some people didn't like him because he fought for equal rights. Aretha stood up for what she believed in, and that made some folks in power nervous. They worried she might influence young people or stir up trouble between different races. She stood up for civil rights, which was a big deal in the 1960s and 70s. You might know her as the Queen of Soul, but she was also a strong voice for equality. In 1967, Aretha Franklin dropped a song called Respect. Back then, America was going through a tough time with civil rights. Aretha's music wasn't just music, it was a powerful message. It made people sit up and demand change.
Everyone loved Aretha Franklin. That's the message from people I met around the community today. And while her talent took her to the top of the music charts, she was also a voice for the civil rights movement.
Imagine being a black person in those times. You couldn't always sit where you wanted on the bus or eat at certain restaurants. Aretha's songs were like anthems for those fighting for change. They gave people strength and reminded them they weren't alone.
We got all kind of music now that ain't got nothing to do with nothing except cars and money and glory. But she was about getting Angela Davis out of jail. She was about working with Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson and Al.
Back then, black people in America were fighting for their rights. Aretha didn't just sing about love and heartache. She used her fame to support this important cause. She marched alongside Martin Luther King Jr., the famous civil rights leader. They believed everyone should be treated fairly, no matter their skin color.
So Aretha Franklin was a black woman who believed in black empowerment and who put her money on the line to do so. And so she was not afraid of the FBI or anybody else.
Roland Martin, who knew Aretha personally, talked about how she was deeply involved in civil rights. Her dad was a preacher, and she grew up around people fighting for equal rights. She knew Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. well, even sharing breakfast with him. Aretha wasn't afraid of anyone. She stayed up late, watching the news and talking about politics. She couldn't stand Donald Trump and worried about the direction the country was going.
Newly unsealed FBI documents detail how the agency spent years spying on Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, due to her connections to the Black Power and broader civil rights movement.
Even the FBI didn't scare her. She knew they were watching her, just like they watched other activists like Dick Gregory and James Brown. These artists were more than entertainers. They were activists. When James Brown and others sang after Dr. King was shot, it was more than music. It was a statement. They knew they were being listened to, even bugged in their hotel rooms, but they didn't back down. Aretha didn't just sing about change. She put her money where her mouth was. She paid bail for activists and helped rebuild a mosque that had been burned down.
She had reached out to Minister Louis Farrakhan and she said, "Have you heard from Jesse?" And she was talking about Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And Minister Farrakhan said, "No, I have not." She says, "You will hear from him today." and he got a phone call.
Angela Davis, in a recent interview, spoke about her connection to the legendary soul singer Aretha Franklin. Angela vividly recalled the day she was sought out in Martha's Vineyard, a beautiful August morning tinged with sadness for the loss of Aretha. The bond between them might surprise many today, but speaks volumes about their shared spirit.
Aretha Franklin is quoted saying, "My daddy says, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I respect him, of course, but I'm going to stick by my beliefs. Angela Davis must go free."
Aretha Franklin once declared her support for Angela in a bold statement to Jet magazine back in 1970. She asserted, "Black people will be free. I'm going to set Angela Davis free." Angela, at that time, was facing serious charges in Detroit, accused of disturbing the peace. Aretha's pledge to help Angela touched her deeply, especially while she was still behind bars.
This is a woman who put up her own money to bail out Angela Davis. And then when someone said, "Why are you doing this?" she says, "Because I have the money and I can do it."
Reflecting on that momentous time, Angela recounted how she had initially doubted the effectiveness of a bail movement, given the severity of her charges. However, people worldwide rallied for her cause, signing petitions that eventually led to a temporary abolition of the death penalty in California. This opened a narrow window for bail, but logistics posed a challenge. Aretha was unreachable in the Caribbean. In a twist of fate, a farmer named Roger McAfee stepped forward, offering his farm as collateral to secure Angela's release. This act of solidarity, combined with Aretha's public promise to pay bail, created a groundswell of support. Angela believes that Aretha's intervention was pivotal in making her case widely heard and ultimately resolved.
She's not necessarily saying that this is the land of liberty, but that rather we should be inhabiting a land of liberty.
Angela Davis's life has been a series of political struggles, starting from her birth in Birmingham. Her activism intensified during the late 1960s, leading to her expulsion from UCLA at the behest of Governor Ronald Reagan. Her journey has been marked by unwavering commitment to justice, often challenging societal norms and fighting for the rights of marginalized communities. Addressing a diverse audience, Angela emphasized the importance of preserving such historical narratives. She lamented how easily history can be distorted or forgotten, urging young people to engage with the past to understand the ongoing struggle for justice. Aretha Franklin wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She believed in the power of music to bring people together and make a difference. Her voice wasn't just powerful because of its sound, it was powerful because of what she stood for.
To recognize that people can make contributions to political struggles by raising the consciousness of communities.
But did Aretha know she was being watched by the FBI all those years? Her son, Kekhoff, isn't sure. He said his mom never talked about it, so it's hard to know for sure if she knew. According to Kekhoff, his mom had nothing to hide and wasn't involved in any radical activities. The FBI tried to link her to radical groups, but they couldn't find anything to prove she was a threat to America. For decades, the FBI kept a close watch on Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. They did this by making fake phone calls, spying, and even infiltrating groups she was a part of. They wanted to know everything about her, so they tracked her every move and gathered a huge file that's over 270 pages long. In those pages, they used words like black extremists, pro-communists, and militant black power to describe her and the people she worked with. Despite all their spying, the FBI never found any evidence that Aretha Franklin was involved in anything extreme or dangerous. She was just a singer who used her voice to speak up for black people and their rights. The FBI's interest in her was part of a larger pattern of monitoring black leaders, entertainers, and activists who were fighting for social justice.
Even though the agency ultimately decided not to interview Aretha Franklin, they monitored her performances and appearances at events held by organizations that we have heard of, like the NAACP.
Even today, the legacy of surveillance and suspicion continues. Black leaders and activists are still monitored and targeted by the government. The FBI's actions reflect a system that has historically oppressed black people and tried to silence their voices. Now looking at her personal life, Franklin moved to New York City from Detroit in the 1960s, where she lived until relocating to Los Angeles in the mid-1970s. She eventually settled in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Encino, where she lived until 1982. She then returned to the Detroit suburb of Bloomfield Hills to be close to her ailing father and siblings. Franklin maintained a residence there until her death. Following an incident in 1984, she cited a fear of flying that prevented her from traveling overseas. She performed only in North America afterwards. Franklin was Baptist. Franklin was the mother of 4 sons. She first became pregnant at the age of 12 and gave birth to her first child, named Clarence after her father, on January 28, 1955. In one of her handwritten wills, discovered in 2019, Franklin revealed that the father was Edward Jordan. On August 31, 1957, at the age of 15, Franklin had a second child, fathered by Jordan, named Edward Derone Franklin, after his father. Franklin did not like to discuss her early pregnancies with interviewers. Both children took her family name. While Franklin was pursuing her singing career and hanging out with friends, her grandmother Rachel and sister Irma took turns raising her children. Franklin would visit them often. Her third child, Ted White Jr., was born to Franklin and her husband, Theodore Ted White, in February 1964, and is known professionally as Teddy Richards. He provided guitar backing for his mother's band during live concerts. Her youngest son, Kekalf Cunningham, was born in April 1970 and is the child of her road manager, Ken Cunningham. Franklin was married twice. Her first husband was Ted White, whom she married in 1961 at the age of 18. She had actually seen White the first time at a party held at her house in 1954. After a contentious marriage that was marred by domestic abuse, Franklin separated from White in 1968 and divorced him in 1969. She married actor Glynn Turman on April 11, 1978, at her father's church. By marrying Turman, Franklin became stepmother of Turman's 3 children. Franklin and Turman separated in 1982 after she returned to Michigan from California, and they divorced in 1984. Franklin's sisters, Irma and Carolyn, were professional musicians and spent years performing background vocals on Franklin's recordings. Following Franklin's divorce from Ted White, her brother Cecil became her manager and maintained that position until his death from lung cancer on December 26, 1989. Her sister Carolyn died in April 1988 from breast cancer, and her eldest sister Irma died from throat cancer in September 2002. Franklin's half-brother Vaughn died in late 2002. Her half-sister, Carol Ellen Kelly, was C.L. Franklin's daughter by Mildred Jennings, a 12-year-old member of New Salem Baptist Church in Memphis, where C.L. was pastor. Franklin's father and idol, described as unorthodox on every level, knowingly preyed on his preteen congregants. Franklin was performing at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, on June 10, 1979, when her father, C.L., was shot twice at point-blank range in his Detroit home. After 6 months at Henry Ford Hospital while still in a coma, C.L. was moved back to his home with 24-hour nursing care. Aretha moved back to Detroit in late 1982 to assist with the care of her father, who died at Detroit's New Light Nursing Home on July 27, 1984.
Dad, you were very close with your dad.
Yes.
Terrible thing happened, right? There was a burglary and he was shot?
Yes. He was comatose for 6 years.
Franklin had a long friendship with Willie Wilkerson, a Vietnam War veteran and Detroit firefighter who also helped in her work and cared for her when ill. In 2012, she announced plans to marry Wilkerson, but the engagement was quickly called off. Franklin's music business friends included Dionne Warwick, Mavis Staples, and Cissy Houston, who began singing with Franklin as members of the Sweet Inspirations. Houston sang background on Franklin's hit, Ain't No Way. Franklin first met Cissy's young daughter, Whitney Houston, in the early 1970s. She was made Whitney's honorary aunt, not a godmother, as has been occasionally reported, and Whitney often referred to her as Auntie Ree. Franklin had to cancel plans to perform at Whitney Houston's memorial service on February 18, 2012, due to a leg spasm.
Whitney's mother, Cissy Houston, was a very old friend of mine. We've sung together many times. She has done a lot of background work with me, accompanied me on a number of dates, and we're old and very good friends. and she used to bring Whitney to some of my recording sessions.
Aretha struggled with her weight for many years. In 1974, she went on a very strict diet and lost 40 pounds, 18 kilos. She managed to keep the weight off until the end of the 1970s. In the early 1990s, she lost weight again but later gained some of it back. Aretha used to smoke a lot and had problems with alcohol. She stopped smoking in 1992, admitting that smoking was harming her voice. However, after quitting smoking, she gained a lot of weight. In 2010, Aretha had to cancel several concerts to have surgery for a tumor. In 2011, she shared that her doctor told her the surgery would add 15 to 20 years to her life. She denied rumors that she had pancreatic cancer and said she didn't need to talk about her health with anyone except her doctors. After the surgery, Aretha lost 85 pounds, but insisted she didn't have weight loss surgery. She made her comeback at the Chicago Theater on May 19, 2011. In May 2013, Aretha canceled 2 performances due to a medical treatment she didn't want to talk about. She had to cancel more concerts in the summer and fall of 2013. By late August, she said she was feeling much better, but needed to be fully healthy before performing again. Aretha returned to the stage later that year, including a Christmas concert in Detroit. In mid-2014, she started a multi-city tour, beginning with a show at Radio City Music Hall in New York on June 14th. In February 2017, Aretha announced that she would stop touring by the end of the year. She planned some concerts for 2018 but had to cancel them on her doctor's advice. On August 13, 2018, news broke that Aretha was very sick at her home in Detroit. She was receiving hospice care, surrounded by family and friends. Famous people like Stevie Wonder, Jesse Jackson, and her ex-husband Glenn Turman visited her. Aretha passed away on August 16, 2018, at the age of 76. Initially, it was thought she died without a will, but later it was found she had one. The cause of her death was a rare type of pancreatic cancer called a malignant pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. Many celebrities and politicians honored Aretha. Former President Barack Obama said she helped define American culture. Civil rights leader Al Sharpton called her a civil rights and humanitarian icon. A memorial service was held at New Bethel Baptist Church on August 19th. Thousands of people came to pay their respects during a public viewing at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. Her funeral was on August 31st at Greater Grace Temple in Detroit. The service was filled with tributes from celebrities, politicians, friends, and family. The event was broadcasted on TV by several news channels. Many famous people attended and performed at her funeral, including Ariana Grande, Bill Clinton, Faith Hill, Fantasia, the Clark Sisters, Ronald Isley, Chaka Khan, Jennifer Hudson, Queen Latifah, Shirley Caesar, Stevie Wonder, Gladys Knight, and many more. Aretha wanted Reverend Jasper Williams Jr. to give her eulogy because he had also eulogized her father. However, his eulogy was criticized for being too political and not focusing enough on Aretha's life. Her nephew Vaughn said Williams did not properly honor her. After the funeral, Aretha was laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit. Despite the obstacles, Aretha Franklin's music remains a symbol of strength and resilience. It continues to inspire people to fight for justice and equality. Her courage in the face of surveillance serves as a reminder that speaking out against injustice is never easy, but it's always necessary. Looking back on her life now, we have to ask ourselves, was it fair for the FBI to spy on her for so long? This question will probably keep people talking and debating for a long time. Franklin's legacy is one of strength and courage. She faced challenges with grace and continued to shine as one of America's greatest musical icons. The FBI may have watched her, but they couldn't silence her voice. Aretha Franklin's legacy lives on. Her music still inspires people today. She taught us that one voice can start a movement and one song can change the world.